Hey guys, it's Simon here, back with the Aether Hub and more Magic the Gathering lore. We're continuing our story about the history of Dominaria, but before we continue, let's quickly go over what happened in our previous video. Last time we covered, in quick fashion, Urza's war against the Phyrexians, the activation of the legacy weapon, and ultimately, the destruction of Yawgmoth, not to mention the creation of Phage the Untouchable. So far we went through everything from the Elder Dragon War, to the Thrain, to Phyrexia, and lastly the Cabal. And if you've missed any of those topics, make sure you find all those videos in the playlist linked below. Today, we're covering the war between Akroma and Phage, as well as the brief reign of Karona. In the previous video, we talked about Phage, a woman formerly known as Jeska, who will eventually become a third of a being known as Karona. Yeah, I know it's a little complicated, but we'll get into it in a second. But first, let's introduce the last two ingredients to Karona herself. We pick up with Ixidor, a brilliant illusionist, and his wife, Navia. Ixidor was a genius at the School of Illusions, a reality sculptor, one might say, who went mad with grief after his wife was killed by Phage. Of course, this wasn't strictly a murder, it did happen in a Cabal pit fight, but still, something like that just can't go away. Whenever Phage killed someone with her touch, a seed of a death worm, containing the essence of her victim, would form inside of her. Before Ixidor could get his revenge, he was banished, exiled to a desert for failing to pay his many debts to the Cabal. There he discovered a new power, a power to shape reality and bring his illusions to life. No longer were they just fancy images, but actual creatures and objects instead. The combination of maddening grief and the power to shape reality to a degree resulted in Ixidor sacrificing his very own right arm to bring forth his greatest creation, Akroma, the Angel of Wrath, who would become instrumental in his revenge. This angel was extremely powerful, as it's reflected in her card, but she was flawed in a way that all she knew and all she had desired was the purpose that Ixidor had determined for her, to kill Phage and avenge Navia. The angel's first attempt was ill-fated and ended up costing her her legs, but Ixidor forgave her, as a loving father would, and enhanced her even further. Her second encounter with Phage and the forces of the Cabal didn't really go as planned either. Her forces lost when death worms manifested from Phage, and Ixidor was swallowed by the worm that contained the essence of his wife, and all Akroma could do was watch helplessly. To make a very long and complex story short, which is pretty much the purpose of this video, Akroma sought revenge against Phage. However, in the end, this revenge wouldn't be claimed by her, but by Phage's brother, Kamal. When the two women confronted each other for the final time, their battle was interrupted by Kamal, who in the meantime got his hands on a powerful weapon named the Soul Reaper, a weapon capable of killing both women, which is exactly what happened. In a brutal swing, Kamal took out both of the bitter rivals, but as fate would have it, a third party, a woman named Zagorka, got herself in the way of this swing and accidentally ended up as the third victim of it. Through a combination of their deaths and weird magic, a new being was created, Karona, the living avatar of Dominaria's mana, and the closest thing to a god that this plane ever had. Karona was a being of untold power, a godlike entity, but she came into being confused, unsure of her purpose. Wherever she went, she was praised as a god by mortals, so it was no wonder that she eventually took the mantle for herself. Karona, the living god of Dominaria. However, Karona was basically an infant, at least to a degree. She had all this power, but she had no idea what to do with it, nor did she understand much about the world around her. She needed a mentor to help her understand her power, so she called forth 5 beings, each one of them representing one color of magic. Teferi for white, Leowin for blue, Fears for red, Multani for green, and finally, Yawgmoth for black. Before we continue our story, it's important for me to stress something. This isn't the real Teferi, and this most certainly isn't the real Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth is dead, gone forever, and this was even confirmed by Wizards of the Coast themselves, atop on Lord Windgrace assuring Teferi that he made sure that nothing of Yawgmoth remained. Teferi also later confirmed in Time Spiral that he had never met Karona, and as we know, his main color of mana was always blue, so it makes no sense for him to be represented in white mana. So what actually happened? While we never got a definitive answer, it is generally accepted that Teferi and Yawgmoth were just projections of Karona's warped and fragile psyche, that she basically saw what she wanted to see, especially in the case of Yawgmoth, who she came to like and admire the most. Although each of these 5 gave her advice on how she should act and what her purpose should be, it was Yawgmoth whose advice scared her the most and gave her a new sense of purpose. He told her that she wasn't the real God of Dominaria, that Gaia was the one true god, and that she should destroy other gods and assume that power. She never found a godlike being on Dominaria, and eventually she would end up being trapped by those who wanted to see her dead and expelled into the multiverse. During her time away from Dominaria, Karona had visited several planes, one of which was Phyrexian, where she swears once again that she encountered Yawgmoth, this time more as a voice in her head. He pleaded with her to stay on Phyrexian, but, suspecting this to be another trap, Karona left instead. Upon her return to Dominaria, Karona, now driven mad by her previous experiences, sought to destroy the land of Oteria, and she nearly succeeded. During the final battle for Oteria, Karona was once more confronted by Kamal, who was this time wielding the Mirari sword. But despite all of his struggles, he was ultimately unable to beat her. Ironically, it would be her servants and close allies who betrayed her and pierced her with the Mirari sword, stopping her just before she was about to kill Kamal. As she lied there dying, her body began shifting between each of the 3 women that were once part of her, finally settling on Jeska, whose spark was then ignited. Karona's death, the death of the living avatar of Dominaria's mana, had scarred the plane beyond repair. This event, combined with the damage caused by temporal rifts, the explosion of the Golgathian Silex, the detonation of the legacy weapon, and many other traumatic events, was the final straw for the plane. Dominaria basically began to go wild. Temporal rifts started appearing everywhere. Mana itself went crazy, and when Teferi finally came back to his home plane, he found a world on the brink of death. A world he would give everything to save, not only for the sake of his home, but for the sake of the multiverse as a whole. And there you guys have it, part 4 of our history on Dominaria. That means we only have 1 part left. We'll be wrapping up our history lesson on Dominaria just before the official lore for the new Dominaria story arc gets released. Remember, you can check out all the previous parts linked in the description below to make sure you're up to speed. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and of course, share it across the multiverse. You can also check out our Patreon page, where you can win special signed cards from me and join the Vorthos army. As always, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I'm Simon, and I'll catch you here next time here on the Aether Hub.